Joseph Belitho Johns, c. February 1826. The 13th of August 1900, better known as Moondyne Joe, was an English convict in Western Australia's best-known bushranger. Born into poor and relatively difficult circumstances, he became something of a petty criminal robber with a strong sense of self-determination. He is remembered as a person who had escaped multiple times from prison. Biography. Early life: born in Cornwall, UK, around 1826 and raised as a Roman Catholic, he was the third of 6 children of blacksmith Thomas Johns, 1795–1833, and his wife Mary Belitho, 1804–1860. Joe was a tall man with black hair and hazel-colored eyes, and it is likely that he contracted smallpox in his youth, as, later, records describe him as pockmarked. His father died sometime in 1833, and Johns and his 3 brothers took work as copper miners. In 1841 the family was living at Illogan, Cornwall, but by 1848 Johns had migrated to Wales, taking work as an iron ore miner, probably at the Clydock Iron Works. Prison. On the 15th of November 1848, Johns and an associate, using the name William Cross, the pseudonym for the convict John Williams, were arrested near Chepstow for stealing from the house of Richard Price 3 loaves of bread, 1 piece of bacon, several cheeses, and other goods. Arraigned at the Brecon Assizes on charges of burglary and stealing, the pair pleaded not guilty. On the 23rd of March, they were tried at the Lent Assizes before Sir William Earle. Newspaper reports of the trial suggest that the pair gave an unexpectedly spirited defense, but Johns was abrasive and contravened the conventions of court procedure. The men were convicted and sentenced to 10 years penal servitude. W. J. Edgar, 1990, observes that in several other cases brought before the same judge that day, guilty pleas to very similar charges resulted in sentences ranging from 3 weeks to 3 months. Johns and Williams were to spend the next 7 months working on a government work party in the local area, before being transferred to Millbank Prison. On the 1st of January 1850, they were transferred to Pentonville Prison to serve their mandatory 6 months of solitary confinement. The pair were transferred to Dartmoor Prison on the 21st of October 1851, but shortly afterwards Johns was transferred to the Woolwich Prison Hulk Justitia, probably for disciplinary reasons. When the Justitia was destroyed by fire, he was transferred to the Defence. About a year later, he boarded the prison ship Pyrenees for transportation to what was then the British penal colony of Western Australia to serve out the remainder of his sentence. In turn, Williams was transported to Van Diemen's Land in March 1852. Australia bound. Pyrenees sailed for Western Australia on the 2nd of February 1853, and arrived in Fremantle on the 30th of April. In reward for good behavior, Johns was issued with a ticket of leave on arrival, and on the 10th of March 1855 he received a conditional pardon. He then settled in the Avon Valley, one of the most rugged and inaccessible places in the Darling Range. The Aboriginal name for the area was Moondyne. Johns made a living by partly fencing the springs in the area, and trapping escaped stock and horses. Often a reward was offered for the return of such animals. In August 1861, Johns caught an unbranded stallion and branded it with his own mark. This was effectively horse stealing, and when the police heard of this they arrested him at their first opportunity. The horse was taken as evidence, and Johns was placed in the 2-day lockup. Sometime during the night, Johns broke out of his cell, and stole the horse once more, taking also the local magistrate's brand new saddle and bridle. He was caught the next day, but, while on the run, he had killed the horse and cut his brand out of the hide, thus destroying the evidence. Consequently, he received only a 3-year sentence for jailbreaking, whereas a typical sentence for horse stealing was more than 10 years. While Johns was serving his sentence, there was a rash of convict escapes and attempted escapes, but Johns remained well behaved. His good behavior earned him a remission on his sentence. and he was released on a ticket of leave in February 1864. He then found work on Henry Martin's farm in Kelmscott. In January 1865, a steer named Bright belonging to William Wallace was killed, and Johns was accused of the deed. He was arrested on the 29th of March, found guilty on the 5th of July, and sentenced to 10 years penal servitude. Johns was to protest his innocence of this crime for the rest of his life. He was determined not to serve what he felt was an unjust sentence, and, in early November, he and another prisoner absconded from a work party. They were on the run for nearly a month, during which time they committed a number of small robberies. It was during this time that Johns first adopted the nickname Moondyne Joe. They were finally caught 37 kilometers, 23 miles east of York by a party of policemen that included Tommy Windick, an Aboriginal tracker. For absconding and for being in possession of a firearm, Johns was sentenced to 12 months in irons, and transferred to Fremantle Prison. Escape. In April 1866, Johns sent a petition to the Chief Justice, and received 4 years off his sentence. This was apparently unsatisfactory to him, for, in July, he received a further 6 months in irons for trying to cut the lock out of his door. Early in August, he succeeded in escaping again. After cutting off his irons, he met up with 3 other escapees, and together they roamed the bush around Perth, committing a number of robberies and narrowly escaping capture on a number of occasions. Near the end of the month, one of the gang was captured by police. Realizing that the gang could not elude the police forever, Johns formulated a plan to escape the colony by traveling overland to the colony of South Australia. This would be a long and arduous journey through extremely arid land, and the gang would have to be very well equipped if it were to stand any chance of success. On the 5th of September, Johns equipped his company by committing the biggest robbery of his career, stealing supplies and equipment from the Tudier store of an old enemy, James Everett. The gang then started traveling east along the explorer Charles Hunt's established route. Their tracks were discovered by police on the 26th of September, about 160 kilometers, 99 miles east of York. A team of police then set out after them, and they were captured on the 29th of September 1866 at Boudélinsoak, about 6 kilometers, 3.7 miles northwest of the present-day site of the town of Westonia, approximately 300 kilometers, 190 miles northeast of Perth. Hard labor as punishment for escaping and for the robberies committed while on the run, Johns received 5 years hard labor on top of his remaining sentence. Extraordinary measures were taken to ensure that Johns did not escape again. He was sent to Fremantle Prison, and kept in the yard with his neck chained to the iron bar of a window, while a special, escape-proof cell was made for him. The stone wall cell was lined with jarrah sleepers and over 1,000 nails, and was almost airproof and lightproof. Johns was kept in the cell on a bread and water diet, with only 1 to 2 hours of exercise a day. In early 1867, due to his diminishing health, Johns was set to work breaking stone in the open air, but, rather than permit him to leave the prison, the acting comptroller general ordered that the stone be brought in and dumped in a corner of the prison yard, where Johns worked under the constant supervision of a warder. Governor John Hampden was so confident of the arrangements, he was heard to say to Johns, "If you get out again, I'll forgive you." However, the rock broken by Johns was not removed regularly, and eventually a pile grew up until it obscured the guard's view of him below the waist. Partially hidden behind the pile of rocks, he occasionally swung his sledgehammer at the limestone wall of the prison. On the 7th of March 1867, Johns escaped through a hole he had made in the prison wall. Despite an extensive manhunt, no sign of him was found, and he would not be recaptured for nearly 2 years. He did not return to any of his old haunts, and he committed no crimes, so the authorities received very little information about him. Also, many convicts were encouraged by John's audacious escape, and a number of escapes were attempted in the following months, so that he was quickly forgotten. On the 25th of February 1869, Johns tried to steal some wine from the cellars at Houghton Winery. By chance, the owner had been helping with a police search, and afterwards invited a group of police back to the vineyard for refreshments. When the owner entered the cellar, Johns assumed that he was discovered, and made a dash for the door into the arms of the police. He was returned to prison, sentenced to an additional 12 months, half to be in separate confinement, for absconding. On the 22nd of March 1869, he was sentenced to an additional 4 years in irons for breaking and entering. Johns made at least one more attempt to escape, attempting in February 1871 to create a key for his cell in the carpenter's workshop, but was unsuccessful. Eventually, in April 1871, Comptroller General Wakeford heard from Johns of Hampton's promise. After verifying with Superintendent Lefroy that those words were spoken, Wakeford informed the current governor, Frederick Weld, who agreed that further punishment would be unfair. Johns was given a ticket of leave in May 1871. Later life. The remainder of Johns' life consisted of periods of good behavior, punctuated by occasional minor misdemeanors and brief jail terms. In January 1879, he married a widow named Louisa Hearn, and they spent some time prospecting for gold near Southern Cross. In 1881, while exploring the countryside around Caradale, he discovered Moondyne Cave. Final years and death. In 1893, John's wife Louisa died at the age of 40, and the death affected him greatly. Years after, he began acting strangely, and was eventually found to be mentally ill. He died of senile dementia in the Fremantle Lunatic Asylum, now the Fremantle Arts Center building, on the 13th of August 1900, and was buried in Fremantle Cemetery. His tombstone bears the word Rhyddid, meaning freedom in Welsh. Cultural references. Literature and film. While Moondyne Joe was bushranging in 1869, an Irish political prisoner named John Boyle O'Reilly was working in the Convict Road party near Bunbury. Although it is very unlikely that O'Reilly knew Moondyne Joe, he must have heard many stories of his exploits. In March 1869, O'Reilly escaped and was rescued by an American ship. After his arrival in the United States, he wrote a novel about convict life called Moondyne, an Australian tale, whose central character was called Moondyne Joe. The book is presented as fiction, and neither the character nor the plot bears much resemblance to the life of Joseph Johns. In 1913, O'Reilly's novel was made into a movie entitled Moondyne. Directed by W. J. Lincoln, it starred George Bryant, Godfrey Cass and Roy Redgrave. Randolph Stowe wrote a humorous children's book, Midnight, the story of a wild colonial boy, in 1967, which told the story of an Australian bushranger based on the life and exploits of Moondyne Joe and a Queensland bushranger, Captain Starlight. In 2002, Signet Books published The Legend of Moondyne Joe, a work of juvenile fiction written by Mark Greenwood and illustrated by Frayne Lesack. The book won the award in the children's books category at the 2002 Western Australian Premier's Book Awards. In 2012, Fremantle Press published a postmodern interpretation of Moondyne Joe's life, The Ballad of Moondyne Joe, including poems and prose by John Kinsella and Neil Lucy. In Song and Verse. The Ballad of Moondyne Joe. In the Darling Ranges, many years ago, there lived a daring outlaw, by the name of Moondyne Joe. He stole the squatters' horses, and a sheep or two or three. He loved to roam the countryside, and swore he would be free. The troopers said, "We'll catch him, but we know it's all in vain. Every time we lock him up he breaks right out again. 'Cause in he goes, and out he goes, and off again he'll go. There's not a jail in WA can keep in Moondyne Joe." Anonymous. Sung by the public at the time of his 1867 escape. The governor's son has got the pip, the governor's got the measles. For Moondyne Joe has give 'em the slip, pop goes the weasel. Anonymous. It were Moondyne of course that took Ferguson's horse. He'd hidden the same in the hills of that name. When he found it had gone, Ferguson searched all the Swan, and offered £1 for when it was found. But Joe has it hid and he pockets the quid. In a month to the day again the horse goes astray. But Ferguson's no fool, goes along to Moondyne Pool to see if it's true the police comes too. When his sentence is gone, Joe is done with the Swan. They call me bushranger. I'll feel quite a stranger, so by the mass I'll try the Vess. At Ellensbrook the silly old rook gets a job at 15 bob. No more I don't know. That's the story of Moondyne Joe. In 1982 a musical play was written by Roy Abbott and Roger Montgomery of the Mucky Duck Bush Band and performed by Mucky Duck and friends at various venues. Memorials: a railway siding on the Eastern Goldfields Railway in John's area of operations in the Avon Valley has been named Moondyne, most likely after the man rather than the area. Festivals: on the first Sunday of May, the township of Tudier celebrates the life and times of Moondyne Joe by holding the Moondyne Festival. This festival takes place in the main street with street theater, market stalls, demonstrations, and the entire town is generally transported back to earlier years. See also Cornish Australians, list of convicts transported to Australia, list of convict ship voyages to Western Australia, list of fugitives from justice who are no longer sought. References. External links: M. Tamblin, Johns, Joseph Belitho, 1827–1900, Australian Dictionary of Biography, National Centre of Biography, Australian National University. Johns, Joseph Belitho, 1827–1900, published in hard copy 1972, accessed online 10 February 2014. Family history site at dbelitho.co.uk.